Rachel. Ooh, I'm being a little bit loud this morning. Well, it's morning for me. Today we are going to talk about adjusting levels so that I'm not picky. Today we're going to talk about spelling errors and spelling variation. And I realized just now that I don't actually have the chat available for me to see. There we go. Hey, Enrique. Welcome, welcome. No, I want to see that. Sorry. I need to adjust something on another screen. So, spelling errors, variation. We are going to start with a little bit of a little mini lecture because I think that it is helpful to think about. Okay, well, I just can't see the chat. That's something I'm gonna have to deal with, I guess. So languages that have text representations of spoken language. Yes, Volta. Oh, there we go. Okay, fantastic. I couldn't see the the video happening, and I was very worried for a second. So languages that have text representations that are made up of units that correspond to speech sounds, which is not all languages by a country mile, right? The fact that in some languages, those for a specific word, there is a canonical representation of symbols that map to that word, right, or the sounds in that word. This is a fairly new concept. So even in languages that have had, syllabic or phonemic writing systems for quite a while, standardization was only really important when we got to the point where people were sharing texts across wide distances, and we had things like printing houses and really centralized production of printed text. And before that, people were just like, who were using these sort of writing systems were just sort of like using their own ear to write down, what it sounded like to them based on the mapping that they'd learned. So standardized spelling, fairly new. And when you have a standardized spelling system, a lot of NLP systems assume that you do. They assume that, the token cat is always going to be spelled CAT, is never going to be spelled CTA, is never going to be spelled KAT, that sort of thing. So when you do have a standardized spelling system, the types of errors that people make are not random. If you get a selection of characters that are truly random, right, like they're uniformly distributed across your subset of characters, that's not human language. It's something else. So because they're not random, we can learn these patterns using machine learning and handle that variation in a stochastic way. And the specific types of errors you'll see. So you'll see different errors with language learners, so people who are learning the spelling system to begin with, or I should say writing learners, people who have some sort of disordered, I shouldn't say disordered, who have some sort of difference when they're learning writing systems, and then finally, people who are, fluent spellers and are, making mistakes, not because they don't know what the correct spelling is, but because of their behavior. So very common types of, beginner mistakes are mapping the wrong sound to the wrong symbol, particularly in that KAT example. If you know that K makes the K sound and you're trying to figure out how to spell cat, K is a perfectly reasonable symbol to use there. English in particular is very bad for that. We don't have a very good, mapping between the sounds and the symbols. Korean is much better. The Canadian syllabary, which is used for First Nation languages in English, is much better. Not in English, in Canada is much better. Honestly, most writing systems that are ostensibly phonemic are more phonemic than English writing system. So there's that sort of like incorrect mismatch. And where that shows up in sort of adults that make a lot of spelling mistakes. So one of my main type of spelling mistakes is I will use the wrong letter to represent a vowel that's a schwa. So a schwa is a reduced vowel. It sounds sort of like and it can be in writing pretty much any vowel. And do I get it right? Mostly, because I've been literate for a while, but sometimes I don't. And then sort of language disordered things, the classic signs of dyslexia are getting B and D backwards, getting P and Q backwards, rotations, switching of characters, flipping of characters. So that sort of visual change in the characters. And those are more on the language learner side. Or the sort of disordered language side. And then, speaking of the types of mistakes that you're liable to make if you are a fluent like speller and you are sort of typing quickly, so you'll tend to see lots of transpositions, so text being switched, you'll tend to see deletions, you'll tend to see, characters being added is usually intentional. Usually that is something that you'd want to treat as like a separate lexical item. So the types of errors that you get are fairly, they're circumscribed in languages that have a spelling system. Hi, Robbie. Roberto, thoughts on GPT-3? Yes, I have a whole video about that. In general, I think it's interesting from an engineering standpoint. I probably would not choose to use it. So given that background, given that spelling mistakes are not random, given that language variation is not random. Oh, also, sort of the fourth category is things that are correctly, we can talk about language standardization separately, correctly spelled differently by different communities, right? So the extra U in a lot of British words. There was a standardization attempt by Dana Webster actually in American English, and most of his changes did not stick, but the removing of the extra U did. And that was like flavor, which has I think it's FLAVOUR maybe in the UK, and in the US it would be FLAVOR without that extra U. And the sound that it's representing is right? It's a schwa. It could be, we should probably have a symbol for schwa, but we don't. So, I mean, we do. Linguists do, but it's not in the classical English spelling system. And then something that Vincent mentioned also is characters sort of falling out of use. So the long S, the esh sound, the ash, the connected AE in Dutch were his examples, and those are characters we used to have in English. A thorn is another one. It sort of looks like Y. So if you ever see something like ye olde tavern, the the Y in ye is actually a th sound, so it's the old tavern. Ye was not a word that was a preposition. Anyway, all that being said, what I'm trying to get to here is that this means that spelling variations are going to be learnable and that you're likely to see the same ones repeated, so we can handle them with machine learning. And something that I've seen proposed by, or recommended by people working on systems, is that you do a spelling corrector before you do anything else in your pipeline. So that's like a component that you build and you put in first thing. You don't need to do that. The way that you can handle these sorts of variations is instead of having a word level model, you have a character level model. And that's what we're going to do today. Roberto says color with an extra U. Yeah, another example. So spelling variation, not random. If it's genuinely random, you are talking to something that is not using human language. And even key smash, right? And key smash is where you sort of like randomly go pop, 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 pop on the keyboard. That's not random, right? It's going to be, dependent on your keyboard configuration. It's going to be dependent on where your fingers start. And I've certainly seen reports of users who are trying to like portray this key smash, retyping it because it didn't look right the first time. Also, how the heck can I see my comments? Sorry, I'm trying to see the chat for Twitch, and it is just not showing up. There we go. Okay, I found it. With that in mind, let's use a character level model. So instead of breaking things apart into words and then looking at like each word separately, and then for every variation in the word, you'd need to like add that to your corpus. Instead, we're going to use chunks of letters and look at those chunks of letters as they sort of move across. Because, for example, definitely, right? A word that's often misspelled, people usually spell DEF correctly and probably LY at the end correctly. And then it's the bits in the middle that there tends to be more variation in. Yeah. So to do that, we have an existing assistant that we've been working on for the last little bit. And we are going to add config. Here we go. So this is our current pipeline, and this is the one that was produced when we was this? I think this is the one, the default Rasa 2.0 pipeline, but don't quote me on that. And we have a bunch of things in it, so let's go through what they are and what we're gonna add. So I should have looked at this ahead of time. We were already doing okay, well, you only need to watch the first 12 minutes of the video to do the thing. So we can go through here and talk about what they're doing. And also I might tune this a little bit to see if we get any changes. So our current config file, config.yaml, has the following things in it. So the first is a white space tokenizer, and this breaks words apart based on whether or not they have spaces around them. So it works pretty well for English, which, as you can see, is the language that I've specified. Work much less well for things like, I think Thai doesn't have spaces between words, so obviously a problem for that language if you're looking for the white spaces. The regex featurizer, I have the docs open in another tab. So the regex featurizer here uses regular expressions to create a vector representation, so just a list of numbers that represent a message. And it's we're including it here because we're using it for the diet classifier components, and the I believe that this is going to be used for the the entity extraction. So if we see entities like the ones that we've previously shown in our training data, those will be identified. And then the lexical syntactic futurizer. There we go. Which creates sparse features for user messages. So this is, each message is represented by a feature, you know, a vector, and it has a lot of zeros in it. That's what makes it sparse. But a sliding window over every token creates 4 features according to the configuration. And I'm not entirely sure what our configuration is because it is, I believe, set to the defaults that work with diet well, because we're using the diet classifier. Yeah, so this is the default configuration. So low title upper. So checking the cases, so we're doing case normalization. Can I get rid of this? I can't. And then we're doing bag of words, sorry, beginning and end of sentence. So this is a token at the beginning of a sentence, which we don't really have. In English, we put a token at the end of a sentence. It's usually some sort of punctuation mark. And this is like a token called BOS, beginning a sentence, that goes to the beginning of sentences. And then more spelling regularization, and then deciding whether or not something's a digit, and then this as well. So this is storing information about capitalization and you know, different types of tokens. And then we have account vector featurizer, the default one, which is, I believe, at the lemma level. So let's double check that. Bag of word representations of user messages, intents, and responses. So a bag of words representation is where you look at all the words and you don't consider their order, so you sort of consider them all together as if in a bag, rather than being, say, beads on a string where the order matters. And then we are counting them, basically, is where you go from there. And analyzer, yeah, so this is going to be words by default, and these are just all ways of turning our text input into numbers so we can machine learn on them. Mika says, can you do Rasa Livecoding for a knowledge base bot, please? Yeah, we have. It's not really a knowledge base. So the assistant that I'm working on now, the link is in the YouTube description, is sort of like the core part of it is that it queries things from a SQLite database. So not exactly the same, but sort of something that you could use as a skeleton to make different types of queries that weren't SQL. Mm. God, I love coffee. Okay. I've actually only had one today. That is my second. I'm just full of the life, I guess. Okay, so we all have two copies of it. One of them, this one, is looking at words. And it's just sort of counting words. And Robbie says, why are we doing one hot encoding? That's a great question. So we're actually doing several types of different feature representations and combining them together in Diet. So yesterday during the paper reading group, we went through and we read the Diet paper, and the results that they reported there found that you could get, you know, really good results. So results comparable to using features like BERT embeddings. I believe it was BERT. They were specifically comparing it to a model that was a BERT model that had been fine-tuned with additional layers for dialogue tasks. And using these, you know, combination of sparse and dense features, they were able to get comparable results. So the combination of features is just capturing more information about the text, basically. So this cares about words, this cares about things that match the training data, this cares about words, this cares about words, and this cares about characters. And I'm actually going to... Yeah, I think leave that as it is. So what this is doing, instead of looking at words, it is looking within words. So the WB here means word boundaries. So it's looking at n-grams between 1 and 4. So one character would be a 1 gram, 2 characters would be a, they call it a bigram, but a 2 gram, 3 characters, trigram, they call it, it's a 3 gram, 4 characters. Sometimes you'll see tetragram. Usually at that point people start saying 4 gram, and then at 5 people say 5 gram. I don't know why it's just the 3 that people have special words for and prefixes, but that's the way it is. So I think what I'm actually going to do is, so this only considers things within the word boundaries. I'm going to add another copy that doesn't care about word boundaries. So this will include things like if I'm typing a word and I accidentally move a character from the end of one word to the beginning of the next word, taking out the word boundary means that, oh, okay, now we're not going to care about the fact that there's a space. We're going to have our window and we're going to slide it over regardless of whether or not there is a space there. By default, both are set to 1. So this is the longest string of characters we will look at. Blah, blah, blah. By default, the featurizer takes the lemma of a word instead of the word directly if this is available. So the lemma is, it's not quite the stem of a word, it's the form of the word you'd look up in a dictionary if you were going to look it up, right? So for horses, I'd look up horse, but for horse drawn, I'd probably look up the word horse drawn. It just means something that horses drag, rather than looking up just horse or just drawn and then trying to combine them together. So stemming would get you all the way down to horse is probably the stem of horse drawn, whereas lemmatization gets you to sort of the dictionary form is the difference there. And yeah, do I care about the lemmas? I don't think I want them removed. And as I remember, there was some discussion in our GitHub of Diet working better with the lemmas. And I could look that up, but I'm just not going to. Blah, blah, blah. And this car WB that I talked about only looks at things inside the word boundaries, blah, 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 added with space, subword semantic hashing. Oh, and we have a couple of blog posts about this actually that Johannes, I think, wrote. They're really interesting. I don't really have time to talk about them now, but they're really cool. You should look them up. Make sure you include the min and the max, otherwise the vocabulary will contain only single letters. So I'm actually going to go a little bit off-piste here. So the reason that I'm changing these things here, right? So I'm just looking at characters. And I don't really care about single characters within word boundaries, and also this will handle it. I really only want to look at chunks of characters, and I'm looking between 3 and 5. The larger your chunks are, the more likely they are to be unique. And the reason that n-grams are so useful is because when you cut language down, like language pieces, when those language pieces are created by adding additional bits, when you cut them down to smaller pieces, those smaller pieces are more likely to be repeated, right? So you see more examples of them, so it's easier to do the machine learning. It's originally a statistical technique, but basically you'll get more examples of things that you can count and add to your data if they're smaller, because you're more likely to see smaller things than larger things, right? So I'm more likely to see this TOR sequence of strings than I am to see the entire word count vectors featurizer in any given corpus, right? If that makes sense. Neil says, will you touch on performance? Yeah. Can be critical in bot scenarios. I once used a naive spelling correction tool that took longer than the bot timeout with longer sentences. Oh, yeah, that'll get you. Especially those like Markov models or something where you have to do, things sequentially across the sentence. It can take a bit. So we're adding more features, but we are adding more features to something that already has quite a few features. And because the model itself is transformer based rather than being RNN based, my guess is that we shouldn't see too much of a performance degradation. We can see. Amina says the root. Yes, thank you. Talking about stemming versus lemmatization. Assam, welcome. Welcome to the stream. Happy to have you. All right. Have I ruined it? We'll find out. Oh, and then also these other things here. So the diet classifier is what we are using. We read the paper yesterday, and also Vincent has some videos, so if you're interested, you can look those up. But it is a multitask classifier that both detects the entity, so the entities, any entities that there are, so things that you've given your assistant examples of that it's looking for in the string of text, and also the intent. So at the utterance level, what is the user trying to do, given a set of predefined things you're trying to get your user to do. The entity synonym mapper, I don't know that I've actually defined any. I have defined some. I'm pretty sure I have. Let me pull those examples up so you can see what it is. Yeah. So here I have machine learning, right? And I have the entity resource topic. So I would store this information under the entity name resource topic. But here at the end, I have this additional value parameter that I've set to ML. So instead of the exact text machine learning being stored as this entity, instead I'm replacing that with this text ML. And I'm not always doing it, right? So here I'm storing this token video as resource type directly without changing it. Here I'm storing language technology as NLP instead. And this is just to make my life easier because these entities are later being used to query a database. And I want the input text to be at least sort of similar to what's going to be asked for from the database, if that makes sense. So the synonym mapper handles that. And then the last thing is the response selector. So this assistant has some FAQs. And the way that FAQs work is that it is Spacey says, what language is this? So this is actually in YAML, but the Rasa assistants themselves and the models are all done in Python. And we are mostly a TensorFlow shop. So mostly TensorFlow for the machine learning framework, if you are interested. And hello, Raphael. Neil says, thanks. You're welcome. I don't know what I did. It's because I'm not seeing all the messages. Gosh darn. Well, okay. I don't think I'm gonna get those back, but so FAQs. FAQs and chit chat in the Rasa framework are turns where the user says something, you want to respond in the same way pretty much every time. So if they're like, a good example would be like, you're talking about booking a car and they're like, oh, by the way, are you open on Sundays? And you can be like, yes, we're always open on Sundays, or we are open until 5 on Sundays, or whatever you want to do to respond to that sort of question that gets asked a lot without changing the whole flow of the conversation, so then people can go back to the sort of thing that they were doing. Is a sort of general idea there. And the way it works is that the intent, hey, this is an FAQ, is detected, and then the response selector does sort of like mini intent classification to try and figure out what the response is. So that's what the response selector is doing. It's a separate model that is really only triggered if you detect that an FAQ is happening. And these are all, so this is all to take the input text and turn it into numbers. And then these policies help you decide what your assistant should say next. All right, so let's retrain our assistant. I don't know why I did that. There we go. So let's train our assistant. And this is one that we've been working on in live coding for a bit. And this particular assistant is designed to help answer questions that I get a lot. So one of the questions I get a lot is like, hey, what resource would you recommend for blah? And then we've created a way to query a database using the people's things that they ask. And I believe that we had some issues last time, and I think that adding slightly more information, being able to handle more variation spelling, will handle those issues that we were having. Hello, Donkey. It's going okay. And Amina said something and then changed their mind. Okay. So it looks like I didn't mess up anything super bad in the NLU part. So I think my syntax at least was correct. All right, so let's talk with our assistant. And the query part of the assistant is being run by some Python code, and that Python code I'm going to run in a separate server. So the Rasa server is going to handle the talking to the assistant and deciding what to say next. The Python code that queries the database is going to be in what we call the action server, and the assistant sends queries to the action server figures out what they need and send them back. We have a Python SDK, but you can use any language as long as you follow our API guidelines. So what I want to do is run my action server so that when I ask for my, that's not going to work. That's not what the file is called. It's called actions with an S. So when I request something from my database, my assistant can actually look it up. All right, fantastic. And now we can talk with our assistants. So I'm just gonna open up a little window in the shell here, and we'll see how it does. Solim says, what about the component preferences and policies for FAQs? Like dialogue policies for FAQs. So the way that FAQs and chit chat work within the response selector, we can pull this up. Yeah, there we go. So this is only going. So the response selector will, I don't actually have enough information to know what your question is, but the response selector isn't always going to be used. It'll be used if the sort of the trigger intent is detected. And the same sort of like fallback policies, memoization policy stuff will still work. So hopefully that that answers your question. I'm not entirely sure what your question was. What about mini batch gradient descent? If I wanted to do tuning on the neural network models, the hyperparameters, can we do that? The numbers of epochs in the config. What about activation functions, the batch size? Yeah, great question. So for each of the things in the config, let's look at the diet classifier. So when you are putting it in the config file, there are a bunch of other things that we could choose to add to do tuning if we wanted to. We've chosen what we hope are sensible defaults for most folks, but if you want to tune them, it's in the documents, the docs, the things that you can do. So epochs is the one that we are changing here, but you can also change hidden layer size, embedding dimension, blah, blah, blah. And then there are even more here under the more hidden, more configurable parameter stuff. So you can do additional tuning here. So you're asking about batch size and batch strategy, and those are those parameters. And if you want to do something even more custom, you can also tune your, or you can also set defaults for your TensorFlow settings, I guess. That's not what they're called. But if you want to set like a random seed or something, you can set that in a separate TensorFlow config file. I don't remember what it's called off the top of my head, but it is in the docs somewhere. Yeah, hopefully that helps. So I'm choosing not to do a whole bunch of tuning, because basically I just want to be able to handle slightly more variation in spelling. All right, so I'm going to ask for, can you recommend a book? So what this should do, and this is going to take a little bit because it's querying the database. Great. Okay, so this was, actually, you know what? Let's add logging so you can see what's actually happening. And I don't want the full logging. I just want a little bit of logging. Hyperparameters. Yeah. I'm trying to remember like what the specific file where you tune the TensorFlow project level hyperparameters is called though, and I just don't remember off the top of my head. Also, I would not call random seed a hyperparameter. Like, I guess under one definition it is, but sometimes people try to tune their random seed, and please don't do that. It'll make me sad, and yeah. All right, so can you recommend a video? This is the real test case. Okay, so interesting. So it looks like we haven't fixed the bug that we had. And the bug that we had was that the entities were not being correctly extracted. And so we were always getting the answer, try the book speech and language processing, because that is the one that is first in our database. Let's try a couple more things just so I can get a... Also, I probably should have turned on slightly more logging. Can I want to learn NLP? Interesting. Interesting. Okay, so we're still having an issue. Oh, okay. Okay, so good news, bad news. I know we're sort of jumping in the middle of debugging, so if y'all haven't seen this assistant before, what it does is it takes in the information that user sends to it, and we have a SQLite database that is basically the information in this CSV. It has 9 rows. It is not very large, but I might want to add to it in the future. And what we do when somebody asks for a resource, I provided stories where that triggers this query resource action. and we create a connection to that database. And then I get the value from the slots in the tractor. So remember when I was looking at that resource type training data, I'm saving whatever the person says that I was like, hey, they're asking for a resource type in a slot called resource type, and then I get that information. And then we are doing some fuzzy matching. So whatever it is that we're trying to, whatever the user enters, we try to find the closest value in our database in the specific column that they're querying with that value, so that we always return something. I'm trying not to return empty queries or no results, because I want people to like get some information, even if it's not exactly what they were looking for. And I think it might be this where we're running into some errors. So if there was nothing passed in the resource tracker, then I'm creating, then I'm changing it into just a single space so that we can do fuzzy matching. But here, you can see applied processor reduces query to empty string. All comparisons will have score 0. So I think when I'm doing the fuzzy matching, I am changing something. Wait, okay, let me double check this though. So here I've done some debugging printing. Video is the resource type. So that was printed out. So that was correctly extracted. And if we look at the text that we put in, it was, I want to learn NLP, that should be the resource topic, and then video should be the resource type. So it looks like that was correctly extracted and that wasn't set to a string, because otherwise it wouldn't be printed out in my debugging here. So that looks right. And then we do the same thing with the resource topic, which here you can see is printed out to NLP. So that looks right. And then getting the results. And then if we can't find something that fits both their topic and their type, then when I return the text string, I apologize. So I'm like, oops, sorry, couldn't find what you were looking for. And if something matches both the topic and the type, I randomly select one thing. If something only matches the topic, then I return that. If something only matches the type, then I return that. Both of those get an apology. Otherwise, I okay, so this method also has a sorry, I couldn't find anything. So I'm using that one to tell them that I couldn't find any results. And then whatever return text we produce here, we send back to the user using the dispatcher. So this connects to, because this is running on a separate server, this takes that information, brings it back to my Rasa server returns that to the user. So what's going on here? So it correctly detected that it was NLP, and it correctly detected that it was a video, and it correctly got that it was an NLP piece of information, but it didn't get that it was looking for a video. And if we look at this, course videos. So it should be matched using our fuzzy matching. That video should be matched to videos with a capital V and an S at the end. And that's not happening. And NLP is happening, and we know that that's happening because this is lowercase and that's lower. This is uppercase and that's lowercase, and the query text is case sensitive. Okay, so and we definitely know that this is happening, right? We're getting the apology message. So we know that it's one of these two, and we know that it's the topic. So why is this not happening? Okay, query results overlap. So it's a ordered collection of items, unordered collection of needs. I think it's this. I think we are doing something wrong when figuring out the query results overlap. Yeah. Enrique says h params for the name of the file. Yeah, that could be it. I don't. It's in the doc somewhere. It's one of those things I always look up because I don't need it very often. Don't be sad. Oh, I'm good. Yeah. So I think what makes sense for me to do here is actually to print out the query results overlap. Yeah. All right, and then I'm gonna stop this. So I'm just killing the terminal where that was running. So good news, the problem where the slots weren't being extracted, fixed. So adding the additional character level ability to handle that, working great, seems to have fixed that problem. Fantastic. Now the problem's in the queries. So, all right. Did I save this? Yes, I did. Okay. Speaking of spelling errors not being random. Oh, beans. Oh, it won't matter. I was going to say I didn't start logging, but I don't think it should matter because our print debug statement should run regardless. All right. Okay, so what's happening here? All right. Okay, so what's happening is that when we are looking for this overlap, what we are actually doing is creating an empty set. Cool. So this is a list. Python find overlap between two lists. I don't think I actually need it to be a set. I think it's okay if the overlap is non-unique. All right, Stack Overflow. Mind to write this in Beaven. The overlap. Okay, I only care about the overlap. Okay, so I don't need to cast them as a set at all. Okay, give this a shot and see if this works. Okay, so this is a list. At this point, this is a list. At this point, I think. Get rid of that. Okay. Those are even. All right, fantastic. Will this fix our problem? Let's find out. Restart my action server. again, spelling errors aren't random. I definitely transpose characters that are next to each other. Print something in the conditions. Yeah, so the I'm assuming here that you're talking about this sort of like the else if. I feel like I don't need to do that because ooh, I got coffee on myself. That unrelated. I feel like I don't need to do that because I know that this condition is being overpassed because I'm getting this apology. So because I'm adding the apology to the statement that's being sent back to the assistant, I know which one of these statements is causing the issue. So I take your point here. I know where the problem is already, so I'm not going to do that right now. If it becomes an issue in the future, I will. All right. All right. I want a video about NLP. All right. Okay. New error. That's progress. Counter exception warning action. All right. Let's see. Unsupported operand type 4. I see how that could be. Yeah. Okay, so my issue here is that I tried to treat lists as counters and it did not work. So instead, I need to cast them as counters. Helpful. Okay, so and then what did I call it? Type? What did I call it? Yep, I did call it type. So topic here is like NLU, MLP, and then type is, you know, book, video, etc. Typeset. Typeset. Speaking of spelling, it was not that funny, Rachel. Well, you know, we all have our own senses of humor. And I don't remember if I've imported collections. I'm gonna have to go up and do that. I don't think I did. Boop doop. Boop boop. Is it a built-in? I might get away with it. Also, this example is from Python, is in Python 2.7, so I guess we'll find out if this came to Python 3 with the same syntax. It'll be exciting times. All right, so now that this is a counter, right? Yeah. Okay, yes, yes, yes. And then getting the elements, that looks the same. All right. We'll restart the action server. I think I need to restart it. Pretty sure I need to restart it. All right, action server's up and running. I still want a video. And again, we should be able to handle variation in NLP. All right. Can you recommend Yep. I do need to import collections. All right. I don't know if it's from another library that I need to I don't know if it's from another library that I need to no, I think it's just collections. Once more. So the reason I was not getting any responses there, was that the action was running, but it failed before it could send me the response back. So the assistant part of it was working fine. The action server part of it had some issues, which hopefully we've just fixed. Rachel, couldn't you open a terminal in the right directory? Listen, could do a lot of things. A topic set twice. Double check that. Lifesaver, thank you so much. Both Enrique and Tian, I would probably not have noticed until that was too late. All right, one more time. Please, please, please. Okay, I should have an NLP video, which is the frustrating thing here. Empty overlap. Okay. So... this is the action server, right? Okay. Need to instantiate collections. I need to instantiate it? All Rasa actions are fun actions. But here, I want to run actions. Huh. I thought that it was being created, so I've imported it. I believed I was creating a new, 2 new collections through assignment. But I could be wrong about that. I've been wrong about stuff before. Please recommend an NLP video. Okay. Well, the problem that we have is not the problem that I thought that we had. So that's an exciting development. So here's the problem. When I first created this database, I listed all of the topics in a single field. So this video series that I made on YouTube, I had the topic as NLP, Rasa. Since then, right, I separated each example of a specific topic. I've made my data tidy, right? So every topic, so in the topic column, it only has one value, and I separated things that have multiple topics into multiple entries. So I do have more rows now than I used to, but specifically there's 2 rows, right? This Rasa for beginners and this NLP for devs. I both, instead of having one topic, I split them apart. And it looks like when I thought I updated my SQLite database, I did not, in fact, update my SQLite database. Because when we look at the result queries, which are in fact correct, right? This is the result queries that I expect. So this is on NLP, correct? This is on NLP, correct? This should also show up because it's on NLP. We are correctly identifying that this is something that counts as a video, so it's being identified there. And I think these are the only videos I have. Yeah, this is the only video I have in the database. So it is correct that it's showing up. I don't have a problem with that. The problem is that it's not showing up in the other list, right? It's not showing up in the NLP list. So the way that I have it set up is if there's no overlap, then I take something from the topic, which is why we're randomly getting either this or this. So the problem is when I thought I updated my database, I did not update my database. And yeah. Do we have time to do it? I have a meeting after this, so I don't want to go too far over, but I do want this to work. And I think adding the additional character level variable fixed the thing where we weren't always getting the entities extracted if there were spelling errors. So fix that, fantastic. Less fantastic, this thing, but let's see if we can fix it. Randall says that I wasn't getting a module not found error. Yeah. Oh, I killed that one. I killed the window where we were getting that specific error, but yeah, I think you were right that it was something with the collections, and I was just getting a sort of a little bit of a spicy error. Okay, so I believe, no, I don't want to take your survey. I believe that we updated this in here. All right, so here we are. To SQL. Edu resources. All right, edu resources. Oh, okay. Actually, this might be easier than I thought it would be. So that's the code we use to take our CSV file and turn it into a SQLite database. And if I go back down to where we are, let me double check. This might actually be very straightforward. All right, I think this could actually be very straightforward, and I made a typo. Keeping on theme, also sort of like the general theme of my life. All right, let's see if that'll work. Ari says, great. Amina says, let's do this. Yeah. Thanks for the support, y'all. All right. I'm a little nervous. Let's see if this fixed it. I hope it did. If it did, I'm gonna delete all my print statements before I push to GitHub, just so it looks a little bit, you know. We fit it! Fantastic! Ooh, caught my hair. Fabulous. It was a silly problem and not a complex problem. Well, no, finding the problem was the hard part. Fixing the problem was easy, which is like, I would prefer that neither were difficult, but that is my preference if one of them's going to be hard. So, slots are being extracted correctly, the fuzzy matching is working, we're getting back our results, we're looking for the overlaps, we're returning the overlaps. Fantastic. I'm delighted. I'm just gonna go through and delete all my print statements just real quick. Just real quick. But it was very helpful in figuring out what the problem was, and yeah, we're good to go. I don't know what we're gonna do next week, because this is sort of you know, this is sort of finished up my to-do list for this project just at the moment. We might do deployment. Don't quote me on that, because it's dependent on whether or not I get some other stuff done off stream. But possibly next week will be deployment. You'll see the title of the stream. All right, I think we're good to go. And it is barely over 10 o'clock, so this was a very productive stream. So we actually already had something that handled some spelling errors. I added another feature a little bit more general to handle a wider variety of spelling errors, and it looks like we're good there. And we fixed our query, so now it works because I created a new database instead of updating my existing one. So let this be a lesson to me. Yeah, thanks for joining. Super successful live coding. I'm very happy. I'm gonna push this to GitHub right after this, so the link down there should reflect everything that we've done today, except for my print statements. You can add those back in if you want to. And yeah, we'll be back next Wednesday for office hours with, I mean, I can say without fear of being corrected, someone awesome, not awful, God, sorry. I was trying to say everybody on the Rasa team is awesome, and I was also reading something with an F in it, specifically the word office. Tobias will be back next week. He was here in November for the office hours. Tobias is great. If you've got questions, we'll answer them. Next Thursday, this time for real, we're doing our release notes webinar. It's the very first one. We're going to talk about like all the newest, greatest stuff. There'll be a Q&A session. Lots of good people in that, so definitely check that out. And that'll be an hour earlier than our usual streaming time. And then after that, we'll be doing paper reading. There was actually a paper about someone, a school assistant or assistant for schools in Brazil that someone built that we might read, because I think it's a cool application. And then on Friday, we'll be doing live coding, and who knows what we'll do. Something fun. All right, have a great weekend. It'll be, it's this weekend, right? No, next week is when spring starts. I was gonna say it's the solstice. It is not. Sorry, the equinox. The equinox is next weekend. So have a great weekend. I'll